right, this is going on page 55 when we're done. So we have talked about arithmetic sequences and geometric sequences. So today we're going to look at the relationships between linear functions and arithmetic sequences, which we've already kind of seen. We know that a linear function in this form describes a continuous function whose domain and range are all real numbers. The y-intercept is the point 0, b, and the rate of change of the function is value of m, and that's the slope of the line. Then we know that arithmetic sequences can be represented by linear functions. However, sequences and their corresponding functions may have different domains, right? Because when we're looking at sequences, they're not continuous. If you look at this first graph here, we don't have a continuous domain or a range, whereas if we have the equation of a line, it's actually continuous. Okay, so they're similar, but they're not exactly the same. So if we look at, it says use the graph of the sequence shown to the right to complete the table below. So they're telling us when n is 1, a sub n is -5. So at 1, we're at -5. At 2, what do we have? Where are we at 2? -3. And at 3, we're at -1. 4, we're at 1. 5, we're at 3. 6, we're at 5. So on the graph, we don't see where we are at 0, but where would we be? -7. Okay, so it says find the difference d and write an explicit rule for a sub n. So d, first of all, is the common difference going to be positive or negative? Positive, because that looks like a positive slope over there, right? What is the common difference? 2. Right? That's how we knew how to find a sub 0. So then we have to write the explicit rule. So the first thing we're going to write down is the generic formula, because remember, the more you write it, the more you're going to know it. It's a sub n, that's equal to a sub k plus d times n minus k. Now, I can choose any term up there I want to write this sequence, or write the rule. But my suggestion to you is that if you can choose amongst a ton of things, but there is something that you were actually given, use what you were given. Was this pattern pretty simple? Could we still mess up on something simple? Absolutely. So if we had a brain fart and one of those numbers are wrong, then we have no hope. So if we use that, we'll have a little bit better of a chance of not making a weird mistake here. So that means that a sub n is equal to what? What is a sub k? So if this is what I have, if n is 1 and a sub n is -5, then that means that a sub 1 is equal to -5. So if this is what I'm looking at, this would be a sub k equals -5. So this would be -5 right here. That makes sense? It's the y value basically. Plus d, which is 2, times n minus what? 1. Okay. And then we can leave it like that, right? We were taking it a little bit farther than this when we were writing these functions, and that's fine too. But it's okay to leave it like this. Then it says use the information from part B to write a linear function that corresponds to the nth term expression. So that means we're going to have a function. It's going to be a function of n. So to do that, this is where we're going to simplify. I'm going to go ahead and take this and simplify or distribute that 2 as I write it down. -5 plus 2n minus 2. And then when I clean that up, f of n is going to be equal to -7 plus 2n. I could also write it as 2n minus 7, be the same thing. That's your slope-intercept form. Okay, we good so far? So this is considered subscript notation. This is considered function notation. But they're kind of representing the same thing. All right, so now it says, given the arithmetic sequence where a sub 1 is 17 and a sub n is -39, and it's in there for me, state the domain and range of the sequence. Okay, so I have enough information right now to state the domain. Do I have enough information to state the range? No, because the range is not from 17 to negative 39, right? Because it's not continuous. So I have to know what all those numbers are. Because if I'm going to state the domain, you can go ahead and say the domain. Let's go ahead and do that, I guess. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Let me stack them. So the domain would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? I have to list it out because I don't get to use 1.5 and so forth. So that means the range is going to have to be in the same type of situation. Going to have to figure it out. In order to figure out what it is, it would be nice to know the common difference. Now, we had found the common difference by using an a sub n and an a sub k and putting it in there and whatnot. But what does the common difference represent? In that graph up there, what did it represent? What is 2? The rate of change. 2 is just the rate of change. It's the slope, right? How many points do you have to find the slope of a line? 2. We have 2 points, right? We have this one, and we have this one. So I can find my slope. That's my change in y over my change in x. So that's going to be negative 39 minus 17 over 8 minus 1. What's negative 39 minus 17? Negative 56 over 7, which gives me negative 8. Does a negative rate of change make sense? Yes, because I'm going from 17 and it's decreasing, right? So that means that d is equal to negative 8. So now I can fill these in. So 17 minus 8 is 9. 9 minus 8 is 1. 1 minus 8 is negative 7. Negative 15. Negative 23. Negative 31. So now my range, we go from least to greatest. We're going to get negative 39, negative 31, negative 23, negative 15, negative 7, 1, 9, 17. We should be writing things from least to greatest. All right, what questions you got? All right. So now it says write a linear function. So we're going to write a linear function whose domain is all real numbers that will contain the domain of the sequence. Okay? So that means that my domain can actually go from 1 to 8 and have decimals and whatnot in it, but it's going to contain that. And basically, we're just writing our little function here. So we're going to start with the arithmetic sequence. A sub n equals a sub k plus d times n minus k. I can use whatever ordered pair I want. They gave me 2. I think this one would be the nicer one to use, right? So a sub n be equal to, what do I write next? 17, then minus 8 times n minus 1. So linear function, that's going to be an f of n is equal to, that will give me 17 minus 8n plus 8. My knuckles are writing again. So my actual function will be 25 minus 8n. Or negative 8n plus 25, it doesn't matter. We good? Easy enough? Okay. This should be kind of a throwback to Algebra 1. Okay, so our explicit formula denotes the nth term of the sequence, where n tells you the term's location. It's defined as a sequence, as a formula in terms of n. It may be written in either subscript notation, which is this right here, or by using function notation, which is this right here. So they give us the sequence, and they have some of it listed out for us. And it says to find an explicit formula in both subscript notation and function notation. So with this sequence, this is term number 1, term number 2, term number 3, 4, 5, 6. So they have given us the first 6 terms. So basically this is a sub 1, a sub 2, a sub 3. So term number 1 is 32. Term number 2 is 27. 3 is 22, then 17, then 12, then 7. So that means, again, this one's a sub 1, this would be a sub 2, a sub 3, a sub 4, 5, a sub 6, then this would be a sub n. So when we have those, these are the numbers that we substitute in for n. That's why it translates to function notation pretty easily. That's f of 1, f of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, f of n. We could have gotten these terms from the graph as well, because it was graph, they had it listed out. Just makes it a little bit easier here. Tell me something you know about the common difference besides what it is specifically. It's negative. Okay, and then specifically, it is negative what? What's the common difference here between these? 5. Right, just subtracted 5 each time. So we're going to have subscript notation, which is a sub n, and we're going to have function notation, which is f of n. And then remember your generic is a sub n equals a sub k plus d times n minus k. And the more you write it, the more you'll just know it. And they gave me a whole bunch of terms, but this one was even written down for me, so it's probably safer that I even mess up writing something down. We'll do a sub n equals, what is a sub k? 32. 32, and then d is negative 5 times n minus what? 1. Then f of n. So when I distribute that, I know I'm going to have a minus 5n there. And then the negative 5 times negative 1 is a positive 5, and the 32 is going to give me 37 minus 5. What questions do you have? We good? Okay. So now, it says, given the explicit formula for this sequence, so they gave me the formula, says we want to write the first 10 terms of the sequence. Right, so we're going to put a little set notation. So if I want the first term, that's going to be f of 1. That's equal to 9 minus 3 times 1 minus 4. So it's going to be 9 minus 3 times, what's 1 minus 4? Negative 3. So it's going to give me 0. Do I get 0? What do I get? 18. 18. So my first term is 18. Do I need to substitute 2 in to find the next one? No, because what's the common difference? Negative 3, right? That's my constant rate of change. This right here tells me what my common difference is. So I just subtract 3, give 15, then 12, then 9, 6, 3, 0. Let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, oops. What questions you got? All right. So then I want the 200th term. Do I want to keep writing these out? No. Tell me something you know about the 200th term before we even do it. It's going to be negative. All right. So f of 200 is equal to 9 minus 3 times 200 minus 4. Okay, so this gives me 9 minus 3 times 196. So let's talk about how to work smarter, not harder. Now, I know some of you may already have the final answer. That's great. Keep it to yourself. Some of you may have already multiplied 3 times 196. That's fine. Keep it to yourself. For the rest of us that don't just like boop and have that in our brains, let's talk about what we could do maybe a little bit differently here to make it, not so yucky for us. Because, I mean, it's not impossible for you to multiply these two. You're totally capable of that, right? But that takes some time and there could be some error, whatever. Just like if I was going to, or when we simplified this right here, I distributed that 5, right? And if I was going to simplify this, I'd distribute the 3 right there. Well, I can distribute right here. If I distribute this and go like this instead, I'm going to get 9 minus 600 plus 12. Now, it's a matter of opinion, but do you think completing row 1 or row 2 would be easier for most of us? I would pick row 1, right? Because then that's some basic addition and subtraction, and I don't have to multiply this big number. But you distributing like that, that's legal as well. Some of you do that when you substitute stuff in, and I don't think you're doing it to make it simpler. I think you're not realizing you could actually subtract first, or your order of operations or whatever. But I would much rather go this route than this route. But you'll get the same answer either way. If I do this, then I'm going to get 21 minus 600. No, that's negative. So 600 minus 20 is 580. I subtract one more and I get 579. And that is f of 200. Okay, so just a little bit of number sense there. But do whatever makes the most sense for you. Just trying to help some of you that don't necessarily have a way or haven't really thought that there should be a way. Then it says, write the slope-intercept form of the formula. Well, I have this right here. This is basically the point-slope form of it. I need to simplify that. So f of n is equal to 9 minus 3n plus 12. And then that would be f of n. So since it actually says slope-intercept, that's y equals mx plus b. So that'd be negative 3n plus 21. What questions do you have? All right, so we have one more sheet of paper. There's only one side, though, that has some application problems, and we need to focus on some wording here. Because the wording can be tricky, even if you know exactly what to do mathematically. Make sure that we understand it well. Alrighty, everybody get one? Okie dokie. Alrighty, so Elizabeth waters her vegetable garden using water she collects in a 55-gallon rain barrel. Okay, I feel like this 55 gallons is probably going to be important for me. On May 3rd, the barrel was full of water. Okay, so May 3rd, the barrel is full of water. So that's before we ever even start, right? That's like your y-intercept. So this is like our a sub 0. And since it's full, a sub 0 is 55 gallons. Okay, we have started. May 3rd, boom, it's full. Then we're going to move on from there. On May 7th, the barrel contained 47 gallons of water. I highly suggest on things like this, you count on your fingers. All right? So a sub 0 is May 3rd. So then this is May 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. So that's 4 that I counted on my fingers. That means a sub 4 is equal to 47. So don't be above counting on your fingers because these things you can get kind of mixed up sometimes, especially when you're starting with 0. The amount of water in the barrel is decreasing at a constant rate. This is what tells us that it's an arithmetic type of situation, that it is linear. Okay, does that make sense? Constant rate of change, that's your slope. So it says to write the first 6 terms of the sequence. All right, well, is the first term 55? No, that's term 0, right? So first term is not 55. So we have to figure out what the first term is. What do we need to know to figure that out? What do we, slope, we need the slope, absolutely. So the slope, so my delta y over delta x is 47 minus 55 over 4 minus 0. Okay, what is 47 minus 55? Negative 8 over 4. That gives me negative 2. That is d, which is my common difference. It's also my slope, right? And negative should make sense because it says it's decreasing at a constant rate. So then what is the first term? 53. And then we can go from there, 51, 49, 47, 5, 43. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6. Any questions? We understand where all that's coming from? I'll take that as a yes. All right, we're going to write an explicit rule using both subscript notation and function notation. So to do that, we need our generic a sub n with the k and stuff in it. I'm going to write it down without you looking up here or looking at anything else. Try and write it down from your brain. A sub n equals. Once you've written it down out of your brain, and double check with me and make sure your brain is right. We're good? Okay. So I need an a sub k. I think I'll just use this one. So a sub n is equal to a sub k, which is 55. D is negative 2 times n minus what? 0. So do I even have to put the 0? No. If I put n minus 0, totally fine. Don't have to. I already opened my parentheses so I can close them. I wouldn't even need the parentheses, but there you go. Because didn't I say this is our y-intercept, right? It's where we're starting. So this formula right here should make sense to you. We good on that? Okay, so that's my a sub n. And again, if I had n minus 0, it's fine. If I didn't have parentheses there, it's fine. If I have them, it's fine because they're not really doing anything. Then I need my function notation. So that would be f of n equals, and leaving it like that is fine, but they did ask us for like slope-intercept form earlier, so it could be negative 2n plus 55. But 55 minus 2n is fine as well. It's more about the notation and understanding that, really. Okay. Any questions? My fear, though, is sometimes, if it's not in this order, then sometimes people can't pick out what the y-intercept is and what the slope is just because they're mixed around, so be careful. All right, so then it says, explain when the rain barrel will be empty. Assume that there is no rain in the next 10 days. So basically it's saying all it's doing is emptying it. It's not going to be filling back up. So explain when the rain barrel, so we want to know n equals what? That's what we're looking for. N equals, we don't know, like what day, basically, is what we're looking for. Will it be empty? Well, if it's empty, then how much is in the rain barrel? 0, okay? So do I substitute 0 in for n? Yes or no? No. If I substitute 0 in for n, my answer is 55, right? Because a sub 0 is 55. Okay, so what I want is when I substitute something in for n, that's a day number, and that tells me how much water's in there. This represents how much water's in there. So if I'm going to say there's 0 water, then negative 2n plus 55 has to equal 0. Because if I want to know what n is, I have to say I want to know what f of n equals 0. That's what I'm looking for. So then 55 is equal to negative, I'm sorry, not negative, but it's just equal to 2n. So n is equal to 55 over 2, which a lot of times is an acceptable answer, and a lot of times the preferred answer. However, in order for me to actually answer this question, I need the actual decimal, right? You just kind of have to ask yourself at this point, do I really have to go any farther? In this case, yeah, we do. So 55 divided by 2 is what? 20 what? Close. 22.5? 27.5. 27.5. Last period, they let me do 22.5. Y'all are right. Man, they weren't awake either. 27.5. Half of 50 is 25. Half of 5 is 2.5. It is 27.5. Okay, so on day 27, is the barrel empty? No. During day 27 is when it empties, right? And even though you can't have half a person, you can have half a day, we're talking about sequences here. We're really using the whole numbers as our input, so we need to talk in whole days. So when it's asking is when is it going to be empty, like when is like basically the first day it's going to be empty, so we can say the barrel will be empty on day 28. I would imagine if you had to explain something like this and you said halfway through the 27th day, probably be acceptable, but again, we're talking in whole numbers, so I think this makes the most sense. Everybody okay with all that? Any questions? Okay, so let's look at some other wording that can make our brains hurt sometimes. So Alan is assigned a book to read for his biology class, counting today Monday as the first day. Okay, so that means Monday is A sub 1. They're telling us it's the first day. He finds that he must read through page 385 by day 12. Okay, so here's where we have to think a little bit. By day 12 means when day 12 starts, he has to have read 385. So, is A sub 12 385? Because that would be the 12th day, that's what he's going to read. He has to read 385 pages by day 12. That means on the 11th day, he has to have read 385 pages. Or he had to have read page 385 through that page. Does that make sense to you? So then when it says through page 665 by day 20, so A sub what equals 665? 19. Okay, does that make sense to you? Got to make sure we get the numbers in the right places here, because even if you can do the math, if you can't reason through the number stuff, that can be a problem. Then it says to write a rule for the nth term of the arithmetic sequence that represents the number of pages that he will have read after n days. Okay, so this right here, this is the kind of thing I'm hoping that if you have to do something like this, that's what it would look like on the AP test, meaning that you do not get a formula chart, but sometimes they just give you them in the questions. Do I know for sure whether or not that will happen? At this point, no, I do not. So that's why we need to just go ahead and make sure that we know it, but hopefully that's what would actually happen. I guess we'll see when we see what's going to happen. All right, so that means we need to write a rule. I don't know what A sub 1 is. They basically gave me these two, so I think I'm going to use this one. They gave me that, so A sub n is equal to, what's A sub k? 385. And then, oops. Do I know what D is? Yeah, I got to find it, right? So I need to find delta y over delta x, and that's going to be 665 minus 385 over 19 minus 11. All right, so 665 minus 385. Let me tell you what happens in my head. I'm going to do 665. I'm first going to subtract 300, so that gives me to 365. Then I have to subtract 85 more. Well, now I can subtract 65 more, that gets me to 300. Then I'd have 20 more to go, and I get to 280. Okay, I wouldn't necessarily. Sometimes I jot things down, and sometimes I don't, but you can subtract however you want, just telling you another ways to think about things. And then that would be over 8. Now, at this point, when I'm working through this question, is 280 evenly divisible by 8? I don't know, and I don't care, because if it's not, then me dividing is just wasting my time and my brain cells. So instead, I just start reducing the fraction in steps, and so I can divide them both by 2. That's going to give me 140 over 4. Then that would give me 70 over 2, and then that would give me 35. And especially when you're doing things like this, it's good to think ahead of time. Do you expect your common difference to be positive or negative? Well, we expected it to be positive. That is what I got. But once you start thinking through these things and trying to subtract and reduce, sometimes you lose track of whether or not it's positive or negative. But we get 35. Everybody good with that? Okay. So then that means I get 385 plus 35 times n minus what? 11. Good. This is the k. And I can leave it like that. I don't have to distribute or anything. We're good. All right, so then it does ask us, what is the common difference? Well, we had to find that, right? So common difference is 35. Then it says, what does it mean in terms of Alan's assignment? It reads 35 pages a day. Okay, so then we can say something like, Alan must read 35 pages a day. And the rest of this could be worded a few different ways. We could just say to complete the assignment on time, or to complete his assignment on time. I could also say he must read 35 pages per day in order to have read through page 665 by day 20 or something like that. All right, everybody okay with that? Now, does he have to read exactly 35 pages a day? Is it okay if he read 40 pages on one day and 30 pages on another day? Yes. So we're writing it this way because we're talking about a constant rate of change, because we're talking about linear functions and arithmetic sequences. But this could also just mean basically that he has to read an average of 35 pages a day, right? So that you can get done. But this is the way it needs to be worded. So then it says, based on your formula, how many pages does Alan need to read today, Monday? How many pages would he have to read on Monday? 35, right? Now, we do know, and we did say, that a sub 1 is Monday. I could take 1 and substitute it in here and solve it, right? But how many pages am I supposed to read a day? 35. Is Monday a day? Yeah. So I can say 35, and I could say, let's see, Alan needs to read 35 pages today because he needs to read 35 pages a day. Which seems like a silly explanation, but it's really to make sure that you understand it doesn't matter what day it is, that's what he has to read. Okay? All right, we all good? All right, so now let's look at this last part. Using your function rule, okay, because we wrote a rule up there, How many pages will Alan have to read by Friday's class? And explain. Okay, so by Friday, think about that would be A sub what? Just think to yourself, see if you can figure it out for all this, and then we'll talk about it. Hey, Seuss, you with us? All right, so let's think about this. Today's Monday, right? Then we have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If he has to read it by Friday's class, does Friday count? No, Friday does not count. We said Monday was day what? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we are looking for A sub 4. Does that make sense? And that's why I say, even though it may seem silly to do something like this, counting on your fingers or writing it down to put the numbers down and wrap your mind around it can be very helpful because it can get a little confusing. Okay, we okay with that? All right, so A sub 4 equals, let's see, what was our 385 plus 35 times n minus 11. Not n, what is n? Sorry, 4 minus 11. Now, on that question above it, we thought, you know what? It would be a little bit easier if I went ahead and distributed this first. Do you think that's going to be helpful here? I would say no. I'd say that'd make it worse, personally. So this is going to give me 385 plus 35 times negative 7. So 35 times negative 7. Here's what I would do. I would do, that's going to be minus, first of all. So 7 times 30 is 210. And then 7 times 5 is 35. So this is going to give me a negative 245. So A sub 4 is going to be 140. And that's 140 what pages, right? So then it says explain. Well, your work is kind of your explanation, but we can say, Alan will have read (140 pages) by Friday's class. All right, what questions you got? We good? All right, so go ahead and get both of those put on page 55.